This is Neoplatonism, and it was to show the order of creation, where man stood, our role in the cosmos. There's other stuff, tons of other stuff with him, but that's the key of what I want you to know, because this is going to affect Western thinking profoundly. Especially because another contemporary group at the time, who are collectively known as the Gnostics, and I'm putting them in red for like warning, danger, poison, okay? They were kind of like 1st through 3rd century New Age. Actually, they were even there before the 1st century. I believe a lot of the 1st century literature is directed explicitly at Gnostic teaching and how it was trying to infiltrate the church. A curiosity in my lifetime, I believe both the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi scrolls were found, I think, in 1948. Would someone Google that for me while I'm talking? Because I keep saying that, but I don't want to give misinformation. The Nag Hammadi scrolls were Gnostic texts buried in Egypt that had been banned by the church for their heretical writing. And so I just think it's so fascinating that we would have those revealed to us in the 20th century, and they've been translated now. You could go down or online and read them for yourselves. In fact, some of you are probably familiar with some of them already. Like probably the most famous is the Gospel According to Thomas. Fascinating. They actually made a movie on it. Stigmata. It's kind of like The Matrix meets The Exorcist. Woo! It's intense, but it's all coming from this Gnostic Gospel of Thomas. Or maybe more recently, any of you see Russell Crowe's version of Noah?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. A lot of evangelicals or Christians hated that movie because they're like, this isn't the Genesis account. Well, it wasn't meant to be the Genesis account. It was actually a Kabbalistic account, which is Jewish mysticism. And if you're a Kabbalist, I'm sorry, but I see very strong Gnostic integration into that teaching. And so what the Gnostics did, like our modern day New Agers here in California, is they were eclectic. They would take bits and pieces of different religions and philosophies and customs, and they would make their own religions. Now, this is a made-up scholastic term. People didn't go around calling themselves like, I'm Gnostic Bob, and this is my group of culties. No, they had different names like Valentinians and things like that. But this, like Hinduism, it became a useful umbrella term to talk about these sorts of groups. They took Neoplatonism along with the Gospels, the Hebrew Scriptures, Egyptian mystery religions, and they put them together. And so in red, I'm going to give you a version. Now this is a version because there's lots of different Gnostic sects. So if you're reading some Gnosticism and you're like, oh, Blackburn is just so full of it, this is nothing like what he told us in class. Well, there's lots of different Gnostic themes. This one just stuck with me that I'm going to share with you. They call God the Father of lights. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
In whom there is no shadow of turning. Fascinating. The demiurge turns out to be Yahweh. Who's Yahweh? What God?
The God of the Old Testament.
The God of the Old Testament. The creator, destroyer God. The wrathful vengeance God. The cover the world in a flood God. The open up the earth and swallow humanity God. I mean, this is a rough and tumble character. And that is who the craftsman is. Then we have angels, spirits, etc., humans. Okay, so in this Gnostic account, the demiurge took essence from the Father of Lights with his concepts of humans, and he actually placed humans in the physical material world. We are spirits in a material world. But the serpent now becomes the hero in the Genesis account, because the serpent comes to tell Adam and Eve, you have been trapped here. You are children of light. You have been trapped in this physical material world by an actual evil God, a very powerful evil God. But if you eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, your eyes will be opened and you will know, you will remember who you are, where you came from. So when they ate and their eyes were open and they realized who they were, the demiurge was so angry that he imprisoned their soul spirits in a body. They were disembodied spirits before this. And if you saw that Noah movie, there's a flashback to the garden of Adam and Eve that are just these two luminous beings moving through the garden. They did not have flesh. So when Adam and Eve disobeyed God, what's the first thing God did to them? They realized they were naked and they tried to clothe themselves in fig leaves. Then what did God do?
Say, where are you?
Okay, but God did something to them instead of the fig leaves.
Clothed with animal skin.
Yes. These are the animal skins that you've been clothed in. Tooth and claw and fur. Before we were light. Now we're light inside of animals. Sometimes in early morning when I'm in the bathroom, I'll look up from the sink and I'll jump because there's like this wild animal in the bathroom, and then I realize it's just you, friend. Relax. Happens almost every day. But how freaky is that? This idea that, and this helps explain a lot, right? Like Romans 7, where here we have this animal body with animal passions, lusts, desires, sex, violence, food, cravings. But we're also children of light, spiritual being with these higher thoughts of love and goodness and beauty and truth. And yet we've been linked together, and let the tragedy begins, right? So now we're in conflict between our very flesh and our spirit. And this is Gnosticism 101. But how many Christians think like that? That is not Christianity. That is not the Bible, and that is not what Romans 1 is about. At least I sure hope not. But you could see how easily it would be to take that reading from Romans 1. In my members are no good thing, therefore with the flesh I'm a slave of sin and death, but with my mind I worship God. The Gnostics would just be digging that. Like, Paul knows, Paul gets it, but I don't think that's what Paul was talking about. And you might have to take my ethics class to get that unpacked more deeply for you. So, when the fullness of time had come, the Spirit of the Christ made his way past the demiurge and his spirits to redeem mankind and to bring our spirits back to the Father of lights where we belong, back home. One of the Gnostic texts is called the Gospel according to Judas. And it's Judas's account of Last Supper. And in fact, I think National Geographic did, you can YouTube search this, but search like the Gospel according to Judas, and there's like a dramatized event where Jesus is coming into the Last Supper, and he just starts laughing. But it's not a happy laugh. It's like a scornful laugh. And he actually offends the disciples. And they're like, why are you laughing at us, Jesus? And he says, because you're being all passionate, like, oh God, protect us, oh God, help us, oh God, forgive us. But you don't even know who you're praying to. You're praying to this. I've come to free you from this. And yet you're doing this slavish worship to this demiurge, to this creator-destroyer God, this sub-deity. I'm trying to take you all the way home. And Judas was the only one that got it and realized unless Jesus was separated from his body, he couldn't return to the Father of lights. So by betraying him, he was actually helping him. See, this is what I mean. And this is why in like 1 John, you have such strong injunctions against this type of teaching. Because this is where we get many of the early Christological heresies of the first century. And this has to do with the nature of Christ. And the two most common errors were Christ was either all God or all man. And people would wreck in either of those ditches. Where, do you see why he couldn't have had a human body according to the Gnostics? Oh, I didn't give you this one. This is the telltale sign of Gnosticism to me. Spirit is good, matter is evil. So basically, the Gnostics are saying if it feels good, don't do it, like to your senses. That's bad. Hear that in any Christian circles lately? Yeah. Taste not, touch not, handle not, this sort of thing. It has a show of will worship. It's kind of like ladder climbing. And that's exactly Gnostic spirituality. As you get this esoteric hidden knowledge, you are literally climbing a ladder to God through your knowledge, through your wisdom, through your understanding. If Christ, and John tells us in 1 John, if anyone denies that Christ is come in the flesh, he is a false prophet and a heretic. And I believe it's a direct addressing to this sort of heresy, where in the gospel account, in the Genesis account, God creates the physical material world and he says it's very good. But what would the Gnostics say? Whose book is the Old Testament? Yahweh's book. So of course he's going to say that. Fascinating. We're out of time, but I'm going to do some application with this next class. I want you to see how this actually, you'll find this even in your churches, your growth groups. When people start talking about like 12 steps to spiritual maturity, stuff like that, you're already starting to go down these lines of acting like, oh, I can climb, I can do this by knowledge, by learning, etc. Or if you're in this idea that if it's spiritual, it's good, if it's physical, it's bad, you already have super strong Gnostic leanings.
Mind if I take a picture of that?
Yeah, go for it.